instead of the country. They're signing treaty with Napoleon. It's unprecedented. I should have clarified that before 1800, it was Great Britain. The UK didn't exist yet. It only existed after the Act of Union. So after the 1800s, then you will have the United Kingdom. Well, officially the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. So after the War of the Second Coalition, France and the UK, they eventually signed a peace, but everyone knows that the peace will not be permanent. The UK and all these European monarchies, they wanted to get rid of Napoleon. For a while there was peace and Napoleon was pretty popular and the Directory was unpopular. Eventually there's a guy, I forgot his name again, but he saw an opportunity to get rid of the Directory, and there was a coup basically. It was quite chaotic. They weren't sure if they will even overthrow the Directory, but after hours of waiting, Napoleon got tired and he just marched his army into the parliament, and there was a bit of chaos, but eventually they were able to force the Directory to resign. Again, it's a bit of reflection of the Roman Republic, because there were, just like the Roman, at the time there was the triumvirate, where three men would control the Roman Empire. And just like the triumvirate, you have this three consuls. I hope I'm correct. So, just like the Roman Empire at the time, there were three men who controlled the Roman government. So the French government too, they have three people to rule them. They were called consuls. And Napoleon was made first consul. And the guy, he thought he could control Napoleon, but nope. Eventually Napoleon just took over the government because his popularity and his control over the military. Eventually, I believe in 1803, he crowned himself Emperor of France.
But I still don't get why so aggressively. Like, he can still be considered young, right?
Yeah.
In a sense, why does he want to grab the whole fame? And is it because he's young and he wants to become the first youngest general to overcome or to rule Europe, probably?
Okay, you have to understand that it's not just military, it's ideological. Because even though Napoleon became emperor, it is still a revolutionary empire, in a sense that unlike traditional kings in Europe, they believe in the divine right of king. So what gives them the right to be king? What gives them the right to rule over these people is that they believe that God gave them the right to rule. Their power, their legitimacy comes from God. But unlike Napoleon, he's revolutionary. He believes in the revolution. Even he says, I am the revolution. For him, the revolution didn't end. He becomes the revolution. So he believed that his right to rule as emperor doesn't come from God, but instead the people, which is why when he was crowned emperor, the Pope didn't put the crown on his head. He put the crown on his own head. So it was pretty surprising. People were expecting like a traditional coronation, that the Pope was there, but instead of having the Pope crown him, he took the crown and crowned himself. So you might think, right, what was the difference? You're an emperor, you're an autocrat, you have dictatorial power. What's the difference? Sure, in the eye of the modern people, there's no difference, but back then it's a huge deal. It's a threat to the European monarchies. So they need to get rid of this French Revolution. They need to get rid of him. And Napoleon understood likewise. His enemies are here to get him. They're gonna come for revenge, and revenge eventually came. The UK financed France's enemy. They send millions. If you convert to modern money, it'll be billions of US dollar to their allies in Europe. Send them money, ammunition, gunpowder, guns, uniform. They supply them with animals for food, like cows, chickens. They even supply beer, believe it or not. The UK wanted to get rid of Napoleon. So it is a war of existential crisis. It's either me or you at this point.
So it's like brand image then, like his own image. He just wants to show him that French has their own hero.
More like out of necessity. He's preparing to fight the British, but the British were also preparing to fight them. So even though, in between the second and third coalition, technically they're at peace, but internally they were both preparing for another war because they know what's coming. Again, the European monarchies cannot tolerate the existence of this revolutionary empire. They don't want to live alongside them because, again, the idea of French Revolution, sure, liberty, equality, fraternity, but another part of the French Revolution is about spreading the revolution. Sure, we got rid of our king, but that's not enough. We must get rid of other kings. We must spread our idea. That is the whole part of the French Revolution. Because it's just their belief. If we don't get rid of all the kings in Europe, they will fight us. They will get rid of us. Only one of us. Again, it's an existential war. It can only end with one side winning a complete war. With one side winning, I will say.
Oh, so
it's either the revolution or the monarchies. That's it. Yeah, again, Napoleon's whole idea is that he is the revolution. Now, Napoleon prepared a navy. He spent a lot. He was hoping, okay, we'll beat the Royal Navy, then we'll cross the Channel. But then, as he was preparing to cross the Channel, he heard news that Austria, Russia, Sweden, Naples, they declared war on France, preparing for a third war this time. And Napoleon was took by surprise, but he immediately rushed south and fought the coalition. The Austrians got a bit too confident under General Mack. They went a bit too front. Now, I need to describe the structure of the French army because by now, Napoleon is emperor. He got full control of the military. He structured them into corps. So in the past, you only have divisions. And he did notice from his campaigns in Italy that a problem about the division is that they're too small to be significant. So he needs
a bigger division.
Yeah, he needs a bigger division that is big enough to act independently, but not too big like an army that it will move too slowly. The whole idea is to surprise, to confuse, and to be fast. So that's what he did. He baited the enemy. He baited General Mack to push west. And then with his corps, he's able to outflank and surrounded the Austrians, forcing them to surrender with very little fight. 60,000 Austrians surrendered. The Russians, under General Kutuzov, their plan was to combine their army and fight Napoleon, but now that General Mack's army was completely destroyed, surrendered, he immediately ran away. And he reunited with remnants of the Austrian army under Emperor Francis, and that is when there was the legendary Battle of Austerlitz in 1805. Napoleon chased his opponents, but eventually it was almost winter and they need to rest. And here comes his brilliance. He baited them. He retreated a bit because initially he held the Pratzen Heights, the high ground. He retreated from there. The coalition thought, okay, he's running away, he's out of steam, it's time to strike him back. But this is where his brilliance comes. He baited his opponent into thinking he's weak. He showed a weak point in his right flank, hoping that the enemy will get baited to attacking it, which they did. They got baited. And then Napoleon attacked the Pratzen Heights. Imagine, attacking the high ground is something you wouldn't see. It's something unwise, generally speaking, right? You wouldn't attack an enemy in the high ground, but that's what he did. And it surprised the enemy. They were uncoordinated, they were surrounded, and they lost. Austria was forced to surrender, so did Russia. And then he won the third coalition.
Okay. This is about his good side, right? This is about his winnings.
But we're not done yet. Because we have another brilliance from him. And so a few months later, now there's Prussia, right? And Prussia didn't join the third coalition. Their king was hesitant. He was like, should I join? Should I? He wasn't certain. But his wife and his court eventually pressured him to fight Napoleon. So a few months after Austerlitz in 1806, Prussia declared war on Napoleon. They declared war on France, which took the coalition by surprise. They were like, whoa, you didn't consult us that you're going to attack France, but they just did. So the War of the Fourth Coalition happened shortly after, and Russia joined the Fourth Coalition too. And the Prussians got their ass kicked. Okay, the Prussians had a fearsome reputation, right? We mentioned earlier they went 1v3 against all the European continental powers. They somehow won. There was Frederick the Great who commanded the Prussian army at the time. Even Napoleon respected him. So he did the same, splitting his army into corps, acting independently. They were moving way too fast. The Prussians were not expecting them. They had to immediately reposition their whole army. And that's when the Battle of Jena and Auerstadt, a twin battle. Believe it or not, the corps under Ney beat the Prussian main army. Even Napoleon didn't believe that. When he first heard the report, he was saying, tell your general he was seeing double, because again, Ney was known to have a bad eyesight. Perhaps he saw twice as many, but no, he actually beat the main army. Again, you have a factor of luck that Napoleon have some brilliant generals under him, but there's also, again, he restructured the army. He understood how to form his army. A brilliant battle. And the Prussians didn't surrender. They lost Berlin afterwards, but the Prussian king escaped to Königsberg. Eventually, they reconnected with the Russian First Army. Now, this is where we encounter his first problem, right? It was the Battle of Eylau, and Napoleon was in a rush. He wanted to force a win. He saw that the Prussian and the Russian army, they were overstretched. They tried to attack one of Napoleon's corps. He tried to bait them, but they caught wind of his plan. They found the secret message, and they knew what Napoleon's up to. They retreated. Napoleon tried to chase, but eventually at Eylau, that is when the Russians decided to put a fight. However, at that battle, it was pretty chaotic. It was foggy, it was cold. Napoleon sent Augereau's corps, but instead of attacking the Russian left, they got lost in the fog. They went through the center. They got hit by cannons from both sides. It was pretty chaotic. Napoleon had to send his reserve in. A lot of men died. In a sense, it's somewhat of a draw because both the French and the Russian lost roughly similar amount of troops. But the next day, Napoleon was expecting another fight, but the Russian retreated. So Napoleon calls it a win, but it was a huge blow for Napoleon's army. Though a few months later, he got his revenge at Friedland, obliterating the Russian army there. But still, you see, even though he's at his peak, you kind of see he still start make a mistake or two.
Okay, is this his last peak?
Hard to say. I mean, he still win a lot of battles after this.
Like small battles.
Big battles. He's still winning big battles after this. But
it's not as important as these.
Still, in fact, more important, I would say. But again, I would say he is still at his height. You can say this is his peak.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, he did a mistake at Eylau, but who doesn't make a mistake? And this is the time where his empire is at the peak because he got a favorable treaty with Russia. Now, here comes his first mistake, the continental system. Napoleon realized he couldn't beat the British. The French Navy lost. In fact, in the Battle of Trafalgar, the British had fewer ships than the French and Spanish combined. And the British won the battle without losing a single ship. Sure, some of their ships are badly damaged, but none of them sank. French and Spanish had way more ships, and the British somehow won without losing a single ship. That's impressive. Napoleon realized it's impossible to beat the British this way. So he imposed the continental system. So he understood that Britain, the UK, they're rich because of trade. And he thought, what if all of Europe embargo Britain. Like nobody trade with them. Maybe they will be starved. We will hit the British economy by seizing all trade, not just the French, but all European countries. So he forced the continental system upon his enemies, all the countries he conquered. But contrary to his belief, what actually happened was it actually damaged the French economy more. It damaged the European economies more. So it affected him and his allies more than it affected the British. That's his first mistake. The second mistake is the Peninsula War. So in 1809, one of the countries he had yet to conquer was Portugal. And he decided that he's going to impose the continental system on Portugal by invading them. Sure, he was successful initially, but then he realized something. He decided that he's going to get rid of the Spanish monarchy. Sure, it's a bit weird because although Spain was fighting against France in the First Coalition, Spain became a French ally. But for some reason, Napoleon decided to get rid of the Spanish monarchy. He invited the Spanish monarchy to France and then just tell them, hey guys, you know what? How about you guys stay here? And then he made his brother the king of Spain. And the Spanish did not like that. So the whole country went into rebellion, and initially he was successful at beating the rebels, but with the British who sent supplies, weapons to the Spanish rebels, they even sent an expedition there. They even managed to kick Napoleon's brother out of Madrid. So Napoleon came back with his army to beat the rebels again, and then the Austrians attack. So now comes the Fifth Coalition. So the Austrians, having lost to Napoleon 3 times, decided that this is the time to attack Napoleon while he's busy in Spain. And Napoleon acted fast. He immediately rushed back to France, joined up with his army, and fought the Austrians. This time, the Austrian army was commanded by Archduke Charles, the brother of the Emperor of Austria. The Austrians definitely learned lessons. They've been beaten by Napoleon 3 times already. It's been years since they've lost. So they've learned their lessons, they adapted to it. This is Napoleon's first defeat as emperor. So he took Vienna, he took their capital, and he decided to cross the Danube River. But he was overconfident. He thought the Austrians would not oppose him. But when he was crossing the river, that's when the Austrians attacked him. He thought he could still win, but eventually from the pressure, he had to give it up. He lost another general, I believe it's Marshal Lanz, another very competent general. He died. He lost a really competent marshal, and that was the first battle he lost. As emperor, mind you. But around a month later, he got his revenge at the Battle of Wagram. Ney was able to link up with him. Sure, he beat the Austrians there, but it wasn't an easy win. It was really hard fought. And unlike previous wins, where he would typically obliterate his enemy, destroy them, try not to let them run, this time his enemy was able to retreat in orderly manner. And he wasn't able to crush the enemy's army. It was quite a surprise to him. He even say, these animals are learning. So clearly his enemies learn how he fight, and they're adapting to it. And that is War of the Fifth Coalition. But his troubles didn't end. The war in Spain continued. It was a guerrilla warfare. The Spanish, they were so adamant on getting rid of the French. This is where a big mistake happened, because he spent so much money. Hundreds of thousands of men died in Spain, wasted for nothing. And so yeah, that's how
his downfall.
Well, it's not the whole downfall.
His early downfall then.
Yeah, I guess you can say it's an early sign of his downfall. It was the first cracks.
There's still the invasion of Russia, right? And then retreat from Moscow.
Okay, so Russia was forced to join the continental system after the Fourth Coalition. However, as I mentioned earlier, it damaged Napoleon and his allies more. The Russians didn't like the new system. They were losing money from it. And so Emperor Alexander decided to leave the continental system. Napoleon didn't like that. If Russia can just leave the continental system, then other European states can just leave it. So Napoleon decides, okay, either you rejoin the continental system or we're going to force you. And the Russians were adamant to continue the fight. So Napoleon invaded Russia with more than 600,000 troops. It was the largest invasion force there ever was at the time. Okay, contrary to popular belief, Napoleon did not invade in the winter, he invaded in the summer. And he did not lose most of his troops in the winter. In fact, most of the deaths happened in the summer. Yeah, most of his losses were during the summer. The heat, the disease, and the Russian scorched earth tactic.
And the supplies.
They will burn villages, they will destroy roads, they will poison wells just so the French couldn't get anything. Every day the French march, they will see a column of smoke. Another village burn, another city burn, another supply burn. And Napoleon's style was quickly moving, quickly beating the enemy, destroying their army, and then finish the war quickly. But the Russians keep on running away, and he couldn't move quickly because of the Russian infrastructure, how sparse Russia was. Because if you see Germany and Italy, where Napoleon fought most of his wars, it's pretty densely populated. You have towns everywhere, you have cities everywhere. And Napoleon relied on scavenging supplies, taking supplies. So he's able to move quickly. He's not reliant on the slow supply baggage. But in Russia, where it's more sparse and that the Russians burn everything, he couldn't move as fast. And the Russians, they would not give Napoleon the fight he wanted. They keep retreating. So by the time he was close to Moscow, he had only around 200,000 troops left. Can you imagine from the initial to now only 200,000, he lost more than half already. And finally, the Russians decided to put up the fight Napoleon wanted at Borodino, just a couple dozen kilometers from Moscow, just outside Moscow. The Russians said, okay, we have done all we could, now we're going to try fight Napoleon here. And so it was the legendary Battle of Borodino, the bloodiest single day. It wasn't the largest battle, but it was the single bloodiest day in the Napoleonic War. Again, because unlike usual battles, the Russians were pretty desperate. They're going to throw everything they have to stop Napoleon. And Napoleon's going to throw everything he got to push the Russians out. After a long, hard battle, a lot of melee, pretty brutal. Both sides lost a lot of generals. But eventually, by nightfall, Kutuzov decides, okay, again, some of his generals protested that they should fight Napoleon tomorrow, but he's the highest ranking commander. And he say, you know what, we've done all we could, time to retreat. So the next day, the order was called to burn Moscow, to literally destroy their own capital city. So when Napoleon was expecting a victorious win, all he got was a city burning. They emptied the prison. It was all chaos in Moscow. And Emperor Alexander was nowhere to be seen. He waited in Moscow for a few weeks, hoping to get a reply telling, yo, are you surrendering? But nope, he got no reply. Not even a no, he just got no reply at all. He's just sitting there, hoping to get a reply, at least something, but nope, no reply.
How many troops does he have back then?
By the time in Moscow, probably around 150,000, around that.
So it was from 600,000 to 2,000, you said?
200,000 and then down to probably 150 or 120,000, but he was down by a lot already.
Okay.
I mean, make no mistake, 100,000 is still a huge number. I mean, the Battle of Austerlitz, the French had what, 60, 80,000? So yeah, it's still a big army. After a lot of time waiting and winter is about to set in, he's like, okay, you know what? It's time to retreat. So he eventually, it was an infamous retreat.
It's enough. It's like, okay, we're done here. We're done playing. We're just going. Gotta go
done.
back.
There's nothing here. the Russian burned they burned their food. There's nothing for Napoleon. He got no reply. So he's like, okay, you know what? Time to go to my winter quarters. Initially, he wanted to retreat to Minsk, I believe, or Smolensk. He decided to have a winter quarter there, but even these cities don't have the supplies he needs. And this time, he was being harassed from all sides. It was a pretty brutal retreat. But eventually he retreated. Huge loss. I think by the time they came back, there was only 20 or 30,000 fighting men possible. That's all that's left.
23,000
20 or 30,000. That's all.
from 120.
Yeah. There's a statistic out of 13 soldiers who went to Russia, only one would come back in
Alive.
fighting condition. More like half of them weren't even dead from fighting. Half of them were dead from disease.
Yeah, because they poisoned the water.
Not just poison the water, it's just unsanitary. Like how are you going to manage the wastewater, the waste of hundreds of thousands of men out of nowhere in the field? So disease run rampant. Napoleon eventually have to rush back, and in the same manner as in Egypt, he hitched a ride and just say goodbye to his army.
He left his army.
He left his army. Okay, given. He left his army when he was near Poland already. When he's like, okay, we're almost there. We're almost in safe space. And he's like, okay, bye guys. Given. He got a good reason. Because by that time, people in Paris, they were aware of how much of a disaster it was in Russia. It was a brutal retreat. Hundreds of thousands are dead. The Grand Army is almost gone. And there was reports that there might be a coup in Paris. Like they're gonna get rid of Napoleon. And so he's like, okay, I need to rush back quickly to keep my position, to keep my power, to try to reassure them that everything is fine. So he rushed back, I believe 2 or 3 weeks. He reached Paris quickly.
Reassurance then. Just for purely
Yeah.
reassurance then.
Yeah, because his position was already threatened. He's away, his army was beaten. God knows what happens. So there was a bit of a panic. I mean, come on. Who will not panic after hundreds? More than 300,000 are dead. The Grand Army was finished. So he need to come back and reaffirm his position. Okay, yes, I am the emperor. No one's going to challenge me. We're doing fine. We're going to raise another army. We're going to fight them again. So he's back in Paris.
Did he tell the other or the person back in town that their army is not dying because of war, but because of unsanitary?
No. Okay, well, he wouldn't describe that, but everyone was aware that the French army is gone.
Yeah.
So he immediately rushed to train new troops again, get them make new cannons again, all from scratch.
Then what about this the army that's not following him? Is he going to recruit them back?
Of course, there will be a lot of them back, but by this time it's just a couple of tens of thousands left.
From 25, you said? 25K?
20, 30,000 around that. And now here comes the sixth coalition. I mean, what, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and Napoleon won all five. Now is the sixth coalition. Prussia, who was forced to ally France, decided, okay, we join the coalition. Austria, who was again forced to be allied with Napoleon. In fact, Napoleon had divorced his first wife, Josephine, and married the daughter of the Austrian emperor to sign an alliance with Austria.
Okay, it's like reassuring then, yeah.
Sure, but there's also another reason, because Napoleon did not have a child with his first wife. They were not able to have children. Definitely not Napoleon's fault, because Napoleon had a child with his Austrian wife. But then again, he because he created an empire, he needs a successor. So he had no choice but to divorce Josephine and marry the Austrian princess. And also, he's trying to say, okay, you know what? Sure, I've clapped you 4 times already, but you know what? Let's be friends now. Like, come on. Napoleon had beaten the Austrians way too many times, right? Four times already by this point. So he's like, okay, again, sure, you might find it weird that why would you make your enemy your friend? But remember, it is about a war of existential crisis. He wants a long-term win. That's why he needs these big major European powers, Austria, Prussia, and Russia, to be his allies at least.
I've never heard Prussia before. What's this? Is this a country or what?
It's a country. Okay, I know it sounds like Russia, but it's a different country. It's a German country in North Germany.
So it's German now.
Most of modern day Prussia we know would be in modern day Brandenburg, but it doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, so it allies with Germany, not French.
It is the one who created Germany. In 1871, Prussia will be the one who unite all the German states.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Prussia joined the Sixth Coalition, and now Napoleon is going to fight both Prussia and Russia. It was a hard-fought battle. I believe he won the Battle of Dresden, but again, he did not have enough horses because most of the horses are dead in Russia. And because of that, he couldn't do what he could do in the past, which is chasing the enemy, destroy them, don't let them regroup. He couldn't do that now. They just run away and there's nothing he could do because he lacked the horses to do them. So for a while, there was sort of a draw, and Austria, under the foreign minister Metternich, tried to broke a peace. He's like, okay, Napoleon, look, how about this? They offer Napoleon a peace, right? So Napoleon will have to lose a lot of land. France, it was a really lenient treaty. France in the peace offer was bigger than France today, way bigger. France will still have Belgium. France will still have a lot of land. But they will have to lose their possessions in Italy, Dalmatia. And Metternich was like, okay, I'm giving you a really good deal. If you just say yes to this deal, I will help you convince Prussia and Russia to not continue the war. But Napoleon, too high of himself. And he is like, no, I will not accept this. And so Austria declared war on France. With hindsight, Napoleon may have just accepted it. At least he would keep a lot of France. But then again, he got a lot of pride by this point. He's not gonna take a loss. He's not gonna take a no. So he insists on fighting, which is a huge mistake because Austria joined in with like 200,000 soldiers. Napoleon went from being outnumbered 2-1, and he's now outnumbered 3-1. Close to 4 to, okay, 3-1. So imagine, given Napoleon won a lot of his fights being outnumbered 2-1, but now 3-1 odds. The coalition came up with a really brilliant plan to beat Napoleon. And the plan is, don't fight Napoleon.